So if there's one thing I enjoy almost as much as drinking and partying my way into a not particularly early grave, it's a good bit of science fiction. And what science fiction show is more iconic than Doctor Who? It's practically a British institution at this point, and even people who've never watched the show know all about the Doctor, the time-travelling TARDIS, and the sonic screwdriver. I certainly enjoyed it, although I'd class myself as a casual fan rather than a serious one. I watched it from time to time back in the day, but I kinda lost interest a few years ago when I started doing other things. But now that it's back, I was thinking about getting into it again. But where to begin? There's dozens of series and literally hundreds of episodes to choose from. It's enough to make your head spin. So I did what most people do in situations like this. I found a man who knows about these things. And in this case, Balls Trek recommended I jump right into the latest season, starring Jodie Whittaker as the 13th Doctor, which has gone down an absolute storm with fans of the show. Try Arachnids in the UK, he said. You'll have a great time with it. And how right he was. I haven't laughed this much since my last enema. But the nurse who had to do it wasn't laughing though. She's currently being treated for PTSD. So one of the things I love about Doctor Who as a show is that the storytelling possibilities are quite literally infinite. The Doctor can travel to the furthest reaches of time and space, bear witness to the most incredible cosmic events or the most terrifying perversions of reality. It's a show that questions the very nature of what might be possible, inspiring wonder and marvel at what might be out there in the cosmos. So Arachnids in the UK kicks off in Sheffield in 2019. Where Mr. Big is standing in the middle of a half-finished luxury hotel, complaining about stuff. It looks like he's been involved in some kind of shady enterprise that his staff are struggling to cover up. And then for some reason the hotel manager shows up early and he fires her. Fascinating stuff, but where's the fucking Doctor in all this? Well, she lands the TARDIS near a block of flats to return her diverse group of companions to their home. In fact, you might call this a retardis. There's Graham, an elderly man mourning the death of his late wife, Ryan, his adopted grandson who's starting to form a bit of a bond with him, and Yaz, who's, well, just kind of there. Anyway, everyone's now sad about parting ways, because that's totally how I feel about saying goodbye to someone I've spent all of 2 hours with. It makes my visits with Tatiana a bit awkward, let me tell you. And for some reason, the Doctor comes across like a needy ex-girlfriend here, desperate not to let them go. So when Yaz half-heartedly suggests they go to her place for a cup of tea, she jumps right on that shit like it's the best offer she's ever had. Jesus, Doctor, you've said goodbye to more people than the average air hostess in your time. Why is this one so difficult all of a sudden? And I love how Yaz's dad isn't even slightly surprised or concerned that his teenage daughter's new best friends are a middle-aged woman and some random guy that he's never met before. Alarm bells should probably be ringing for you, sir. The Doctor also acts really weird and goofy here, like she's forgotten how to talk to humans, which is kind of strange because previous Doctors have been shown to be perfectly comfortable conversing with average civilians, but whatever. The Doctor is, in her own words,
"We're just socially awkward."
Please, don't bother showing us this stuff and allowing us to form our own opinions. Just have the characters literally come out and describe their own personalities for us. That's the hallmark of good writing. Anyway, Yaz gets a call from her mum, who's the hotel manager that got fired at the start of the episode. She wants Yaz to come and pick her up, which begs the question, how the fuck did you get to the hotel in the first place if you don't have any transportation? Also, why would anyone build a luxury hotel in Sheffield? Anyway, Yaz goes to get her, and the Doctor's apparently so desperate for stuff to do that she instantly becomes fascinated when she spots a woman trying to get into a neighbouring apartment. Let's just call her Science Lady, because I can't be bothered researching the character's actual name. They break into the apartment, and oh no, the owner's been cocooned by a giant spider. Wow, it was lucky the gang happened to show up when all of this was going on, eh? So they trap the spider in the apartment using vinegar and garlic, which apparently acts as a repellent, and then they just walk away, like there's no possibility that this deadly creature could find some other way out of the place. They don't even tell Yaz's family, who literally live right next door, or notify the police about what's happened. Instead, they go with Science Lady, who explains that she works in a lab that's been doing research on spiders, and they've been monitoring unusual spider activity all across the city. Could there be a connection situation, I wonder? But she assures the doctor that none of their spiders have escaped, and any of their experiments are safely disposed of when they're finished with them. Aren't they? Anyway, the doctor looks up a map of the spider sightings and literally joins the dots to figure out the source of the outbreak. Because obviously, nobody else could make such an insane logical deduction. So Yaz gets to the hotel to pick up her mum, but then Mr. Big arrives and threatens them with a gun because he's mad she didn't leave quickly enough. What's a genius move, sir? Yaz was literally about to take her mum away, and then you stormed in and pointed a gun at them. That is not the sort of thing you can just do in the UK and expect people to forget about. You know, it's weird, right? But this guy's appearance, attitude, and personal history kind of remind me of someone. He's a billionaire property mogul with a right-wing worldview who's planning to make a run for president in 2020. Is that a reference to someone? Is that a reference to someone? Is that a reference to someone? Nah, drawing a blank here. Anyway, instead of sending them on their way, he takes them both upstairs to rant about the state of the hotel bedrooms, which are filled with cobwebs. Whatever could this mean? So it turns out all the spiders are coming from the hotel, and they start breaking through bathtubs and causing general mayhem and stupidity. The doctor and her 500-odd companions arrive, and eventually they figure out the source of the outbreak. Are you ready for this? So the hotel is built on top of an abandoned coal mine. Mr. Big purchased the land cheaply to build his luxury resort, but he also decided to use the mine as landfill for toxic waste disposal, because I guess his scheme wasn't diabolical enough. And the dead spider experiments from the lab were dropped in there too, and somehow they mutated in the toxic waste and turned into the giant monsters that are killing everyone. What the fuck? How is any of this even remotely possible? Who wrote this shit? This is like the plot from a 1980s kids cartoon. Anyway, they have to do something about this situation because I guess police, local government, the military, or even UNIT don't exist now. So they go to Mr. Big's panic room, and his solution is to use the weapons stored in there to kill the spiders, which seems like a perfectly rational thing to do in my book, considering they're already responsible for at least 3 human deaths, and possibly many more across the city. But the doctor's like, nah, it'll be fine. She wants to enact the far more humane plan of luring the spiders into the panic room and sealing them inside, allowing them to die a slow, agonizing death from starvation and oxygen deprivation. Wow, talk about misguided morality. I guess she comes from the Rose Tico School of Animal Welfare. So they figure out that the spiders hunt by sensing vibrations in the ground. And what better way of creating vibrations than by hooking up an iPhone to some speakers and blasting out some wicked garage music. And so the spiders march in there, moving in time to the music. So all the little ones are taken care of, but it turns out there's one more spider lurking in the hotel ballroom, and they all head there to deal with it, though I'm a bit curious as to how they expect to deal with it when they've already used up the panic room option and there's nowhere else to seal the thing in. But then it turns out that the spider's already grown beyond the limits of its own biology, and its respiration system can't support it for much longer. But then Mr. Big comes in and shoots it dead, because apparently one handgun bullet is enough to kill a spider the size of a fucking bus. And the doctor gets all mad and preachy at him, which is pretty much her reason for being now, and he's like, nah, it'll be fine, I'm off to be president. And then he swaggers off like he totally doesn't give a shit. What a fucking legend. And that's it. That's the epic plot for Arachnids in the UK. My first and probably last adventure with the 13th Doctor. It's also 49 minutes of my life that I'm never getting back. Thanks, Balls Trek. You know, I've heard it said by multiple people that the current season is overly preachy and political, and that it spends far too much time on Earth dealing with human issues instead of making use of the show's endless storytelling potential. And to be honest, there's nothing in this episode to convince me otherwise. The theoretical main plot about the mutated spiders and Mr. Big is basically just an excuse to lecture the audience about a bunch of 2019 hot topics such as corporate greed, environmentalism, animal rights, gun control, and the dangers of the Orange Man. Although I do think it's kind of weird that the laboratory performing invasive genetic experiments on spiders before discarding their dead bodies is never criticised in the slightest for any of this. But then, maybe that's something to do with the person who runs the place. Also, why does the Doctor now have a bigger entourage than Lady Gaga? You see, having a human companion go on adventures with the Doctor is kind of a tradition on this show, partly because it's a neat way of having the voice of the audience there to question what's happening, but more subtly, it gives us someone who can challenge the Doctor's opinions and provide a moral counterpoint to his perspective. They might not be super smart like he is, but they can often see a situation more clearly because they don't carry around the emotional baggage that he does, and the best companions weren't afraid to call him out on his bullshit from time to time. But not now. Now everyone just kind of agrees with everything the Doctor says and does. They practically worship her and hang on her every word. It's like she's got her own personal group of yes men following her around and massaging her ego, and I can't help but feel that the writers have missed the point here. The other thing about companions is that you're only really supposed to have one of them. Yeah, sometimes the show pushed the boat out and had two, but now there's three of the fucking things. And if you think this means the plot will be stretched too thin over too many characters, you'd be absolutely right. Nobody really gets the screen time they need to grow and develop. There's not enough going on for each character to have a viable objective, so a lot of the time you end up with people just standing around, waiting for the plot to give them something to do. And if you're having to think of stuff for your characters to do, they probably shouldn't be there. Bradley Walsh spends most of the episode looking like he doesn't really understand why he's there or what's going on, and he's got this kind of tired, patient smile that suggests he'd much rather be somewhere else. Compared to his younger castmates, he looks old, out of place and uncomfortable with the kind of wacky shenanigans the show's got him involved in. But credit to him, the guy shines when he gets to just play regular scenes as a grieving husband, or a loving stepfather torn between holding on to his adopted grandson or letting him reconnect with his biological dad. Scenes like this are well done and well acted, but they feel kind of tacked on to the rest of the episode rather than a meaningful part of the story. Tosin Cole is a bit of a non-entity as Ryan. The script doesn't really ask much of him, so I've got no idea what he can deliver as an actor, while Mandeep Gill looks lost and out of her depth as Yaz. There's no charisma or screen presence involved here. She's just kind of there, saying what the script needs her to say, and I find it kind of laughable that she's meant to be a police officer. Was it like collect 5 ring pulls and become a cop? And I guess no review of Doctor Who would be complete without talking about the Doctor herself. And this is where my pronouns are going to get more confusing than a progressive Twitter bio, because first I want to talk about the Doctor character as a whole, and since he's been played by male actors up to this point, I'm going to refer to him as, well, a male. Now, under normal circumstances, the Doctor is actually kind of a fascinating character. He's a veteran time traveller, the last survivor of his race, a man who's hundreds of years old, who's been reborn into new bodies a dozen times over, who's been in countless adventures and forced to make some horrific choices that have reshaped the fate of the entire universe, and these experiences have left a mark on him. Yeah, he usually puts on a wacky, jovial facade, and his dress sense is, well, unique, but there's a darkness in the core of his character, a sadness, an anger, and a ruthlessness that you only get glimpses of from time to time, but when it does come out, it's usually devastating. The Doctor dresses and acts like a bumbling moron because it puts his enemies off balance. They don't see him as a threat. Not until it's too late anyway. But in this case, I'm starting to think the 13th Doctor might actually be a moron. She's always making dumb decisions, like venturing headfirst into a spider's lair to look for a missing man. She's always trying to involve herself in other people's business, like she literally has nothing better to do with her time. She's always heaping weirdly creepy compliments on her companions, and lashing out with preachy, moralistic rants at people she sees as evil, without understanding the context or the circumstances of their lives. She comes across as a moral busybody, like an old person with no friends, who sits by their window all day long, looking for something vaguely suspicious to complain about. Seeing her doesn't inspire thoughts of adventure or excitement in me. It just makes me think I'd rather stay at home than be locked in a police box with this arsehole. It's not really helped by Jodie Whittaker's performance either, which I can charitably describe as broad-brushed. Basically, everything she does to extremes, with almost nothing in between. Whether it's the ridiculous facial expressions, the sudden shift from cheerful and jokey to somber and reflective, like someone just flicked a switch in her head, or the painful attempts at goofy humour. There's no subtlety, there's no sense of a hidden layer beneath the facade. Everything she does is straight up and on the nose, and it reminds me of a Doctor Who cosplayer trying to imitate the Doctor, instead of a professional actress that's taken the time to study and understand the character. One of my big criticisms of certain movies these days is the way the characters seem to form lifelong bonds of friendship in like 5 minutes, because the plot needs it to happen for drama and reasons. And Doctor Who falls victim to the same curse. Why is everyone playing this like they've known each other for decades, and this is some painfully poignant goodbye? It all feels cheap and manipulative and unearned, and I guess that's how I'd sum up the entire episode. Doctor Who feels like it's been placed in the hands of a creative team who don't particularly care for the source material, portrayed by actors who lack the skill, the motivation, or the humility to do their jobs properly. And if this is an indication of what the rest of the series has in store, all I can say to them is good fucking luck, because you're gonna need it. Anyway, that's all I have for today. Go away now.